We think we're ready for week one. We've done the work. We've put in the reps during the offseason, but are we really ready for the college football season to get rolling? I'm going to make sure that we're all ready, all dialed in, all on the same page when week one gets going. But hey, we're glad to have y'all here, man. You watching this show and being a college football sicko is really part of the work to be ready for week one. So thank you for that. If you're new, welcome into the Hard Count. This is the People's College Football Show. It is Wednesday, August 14th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. And we're talking week one, if you can't already tell. And that's a beautiful thing because we've sort of peaked at week one. We've done some never too early breakdowns of specific matchups for week one. But like now it feels like we're finally home because we're talking about week one in more of a present tense. Like we're going to talk about the most important things for the Florida-Miami game. That's give or take 17 days away, but who's counting? We're going to talk about what's hanging in the balance from week one when it comes to the A&M Notre Dame game. When we talk about LSU and USC in Vegas, which, spoiler alert, what happens in Vegas will not stay in Vegas when it comes to that game, so we'll leave it at that. We also have Jesse Simonton, national columnist for us here at On3, joining the show in a matter of, give or take, call it 15-ish minutes, 10-ish minutes to break down his college football playoff field. We gave you our predictions, I guess it was 2 Thursdays ago. Jesse's predictions dropped on on3.com within the last week. We don't match up on everything, but still, I think his playoff field is, there's nobody more dialed into college football than Jesse Simonton, so I'm excited to talk about that with him. Also, we got record predictions for Oregon and Clemson. Kirby Smart addressed the media yesterday during fall camp and talked about the deterioration of football. And some things he said kind of perk your antennas up a little bit and kind of raise some eyebrows. You're like, deterioration of football? Like, what is Kirby talking about? He wasn't just talking about Georgia. He was talking about college football as a whole. So there's more than what meets the eye there. How does that impact college football? How does it impact Georgia? I think Kirby Smart now, with Nick Saban's retirement, as we've all sort of aligned on this, he is now the spokesperson for our sport. And so when he says something like this that is, relevant to the entire landscape of the sport, I think we would be wise to listen. Glad to have y'all here. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, no time like the present. Let's lock in. If you have not yet subscribed to the podcast feed, because we got a lot of y'all listening, whether you're at the gym or whether you're, doing your schoolwork as that gets, back ramped up, make sure you're locked in there as well. So thank you for that. We're going to have a great show for y'all today. Again, Jesse Simonton joining us here in a matter of moments. So that'll be a good time. Cannot wait for that. Also want to make sure y'all are looped in on this. So if you use code JD1 at on3.com, you get yourself a subscription to on3.com. Access to all the sites, whether it be the Bengal Tiger, whether it be Huskers Online if you're a Nebraska fan, or War Chant if you're a Florida State fan, Dog HQ if you're a Georgia fan. Get access to all of that for $1 for 1 month. Okay, so go ahead, use that code JD1. You will not be sorry to get dialed into the nth degree when it comes to everything fall camp and the season as we jump in head first. All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to get ready for week one. We're going to do that together here. And when I talk about getting ready for week one, yes, like the teams are getting ready and that's one part of it. But I think like even more specifically, how are we as college football fans supposed to be ready for week one? So a couple of best practices here for those of y'all that are getting ready to dive into this thing. Let's check the portal. Let's make sure that we check the transfer portal. And we don't need to know every single roster move. Like, that's why you come to shows like this, so we can keep you in the know for who that second-string defensive lineman is and who your team got at corner and things like that. I'm talking about, let's know the big players. Let's know the quarterbacks. Riley Leonard, he's at Notre Dame. Dylan Gabriel, he's at Oregon. Right? Let's make sure that we are all in the know there when it comes to those more front-facing players, face the program kind of players. Let's do our homework on the back end there. Okay? So there's that part of it. Let's check the portal. The other part of this, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit more practical for us. We're approaching that part of the year where family and friends are going to have things that, they're going to invite you to. And they should. They love you. They want you hanging out with them on Saturday. They want to invite you to X, Y, and Z event, X, Y, and Z hangout, kickback, whatever. And that's great. We appreciate that. We love that. However, this is the part of the year where we need to start to set expectations. Setting expectations, I think it's beneficial right now, at early parts of the week, before week 0. Hey, just so you know, I can't do this in the next coming Saturdays. Hey, just so you know, I'm not going to be available for that October Saturday that you want to hang out on. I'm not going to be able to make it to that. The goal here in doing this is to be able to turn down as many invitations as possible before you even get the invite. Like, you want your family and friends to know, oh, hey, actually don't invite JD to that because he's watching football that day. Oh, his team's playing that day. That is the goal here, all right? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. All right, I'll say that. Also, week zero. Week zero kind of gets a bad rap. We honor week zero on this show. Week zero is for getting a rep. Maybe your team's not playing Saturday. That's okay. Maybe you're not a Georgia Tech fan or a Florida State fan. It's your prerogative. But even with that being said, when we hit week one, we cannot be trying to figure out our routine and our rhythm. Like week zero, make sure you kind of get comfortable with what you're going to do on Saturday mornings, because by the time October hits, or dare I say December hits, we got to be operating at maximal efficiency. Got to be playing your best ball at that point in time. So for me, I've made it very, very well known that we do Chick-fil-A breakfast. That is my thing. Spicy chicken burrito, iced coffee. Don't even drink coffee unless it's from there on a college football Saturday. It is what it is. That is the routine. If I want to tinker with that, I'm not doing it come week one. Maybe we'll switch something up week zero. Maybe we switch the order up. Some of y'all go work out before the games. More power to you. Make sure you got the rhythm set by week one. So for week zero now, try it out. Maybe try some different things if you want to try a different breakfast, whatever. Get your rhythm, get your routine nailed in, because again, by week one, we're off and running. Now, here's probably the most important piece of advice I can give to a lot of y'all watching the show. And this is something that I work through as well personally. A lot of y'all are in relationships. A lot of y'all are married. So the question then becomes hey, I care about this person. I love this person. However, for the next 4-ish months, on Saturday, I don't really want to be that accessible. How do I communicate that to somebody? Here's what I would say. Make deposits now to make withdrawals later. Okay, when I say make deposits, I'm saying hey, you're going to take that vacation, take it. You're doing an extra date night a week maybe. Maybe you're doing more things during the week, whether it be chores or laundry, whatever. You make sure you put in the deposits. You do the legwork right now to reap the reward on Saturday, just like anything else. Hard now, easy later. Also, we want to over-communicate expectations. Same thing we said about family and friends. It's the same thing for your spouse. Let them know, hey, Saturday, this is on Monday, Tuesday. Hey, on Saturday, from noon to 4 o'clock, in a perfect world, it's 7 a.m. to 2 a.m., but, pick your battles there. I'm not available. I'm doing this. And make sure you make it worth their while now, okay? Again, over-communicating expectations, that's crucial. Do the work during the week to reap the rewards on the weekends. All right? If you have questions or if you want to talk about this in a more in-depth capacity, my socials and the DMs are always open on Twitter and Instagram. Mobile devices also crucial. They have all the games, which is the beautiful part about technology and YouTube TV. Would encourage you to do that. But again, do the work during the week so you can watch it at home, or even in a better case, you can go to the game. So it is what it is. But that's the best practices, in my opinion, to get you locked in for week one. But again, it's a case-by-case basis for all of us. We're all doing our best. Godspeed. So when it comes to what's actually hanging in the balance, though, for week one of the college football season, this slate is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. We got Jesse Simonton here in a matter of minutes, I believe. So I'm going to check with Nick here. Nick, is he in yet, or we still got a few minutes with him? Okay, cool. We're going to give him a few minutes. Great. Good to know. All right, so we'll do this segment. We'll get to Jesse here in a matter of minutes, talking about his college football playoff field. All right, so what hangs in the balance for week one? You look at this lineup, man, it is a buffet, talking about good matchups. And so not just a thing where we're going to talk about, this is how I see the game breaking down, because we're going to do that during the Tuesday show of our week one live show. Those of y'all that have been around, we do Tuesday predictions. But what's at stake for some of these games? Georgia-Clemson, I think, is fascinating, because Georgia, they expect to win it all. If they were to win that game in Atlanta, they're 2-touchdown favorites, so it wouldn't really be all that surprising or that much of a thing. But if Clemson wins, that's where it becomes a lot more intriguing. If Clemson wins this football game, that likely means they played well enough offensively to score on a Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann defense. And, I mean, it would be a flag plant for Dabo and co. It would feel like Clemson is back, is a funny word to use, but back in a lot of ways is kind of, I think, the vibe we would get from Clemson. But, like, from a macro level, looking at Georgia and Clemson, if Clemson beats Georgia, who else on their schedule is going to give them issues? Not telling you that Clemson couldn't slip up along the way against a team like a Florida State or whoever on their schedule, but like, I'm just saying, we're talking about Clemson. If they were to beat Georgia, that's their toughest test of the year. And the confidence that would build for a Dabo Swinney and for a Cade Klubnik, as if they need more confidence, but just the actually going out and doing it side of things, that'd be massive. That would be absolutely massive. You cannot overstate the impact that would have on a Clemson football team. Also, just so we're on the same page here, I would owe a lot of y'all that are in Clemson, South Carolina many apologies, because I've told y'all I think Georgia's going to roll in that game. And if they don't, I will eat crow, and we'll talk about it on that Sunday. Miami at Florida is a game we're going to talk about a little bit later in this show, but you could argue this is the biggest game of the season for both of these outfits. The recruiting implications of this is obvious, like to be able to walk into a living room and have a recruit be down to Florida and Miami and say, go there if you want to, but just make sure you know that we beat the brakes off them in week one. It's a nice pitch to be able to make. Whether you actually beat the brakes off of them or not, you know, whenever you make a pitch, things kind of get amplified, so it is what it is. But the approval rating for the losing coach, I mean, post-game Twitter for this, y'all, is going to be cinema. It is. Like, it is going to be must-see television. Twitter afterwards will be dogging the opposing coach. Now, right or wrong, that's just kind of the reality of this thing. And that doesn't really mean anything for the football team. Doesn't really mean anything for the head coach. I mean, losing to Florida or losing to Miami would be a bad look, and it doesn't help either coach. But, like, in terms of the actual next week, doesn't really have any tangible impact. But what I would say is it does turn up the external noise around their football program. And with that being the case now, that's just another obstacle you have to deal with when it comes to trying to minimize distractions and trying to keep your guys focused. And everybody's on Twitter these days. If you're on, you know, if you're playing college football, like just another thing that you have to try and turn the volume down on. So that's the other part of this. But if, I mean, for the winning side, whether it's Florida or Miami, the momentum would be astronomical. Astronomical. I think that's like I don't know how many points you get in Scrabble when that happens, but you get a lot of points. Florida, you can say that, hey, we just beat a team that a lot of people are picking to make the college football playoff. We beat them in game one. Like, what can't we accomplish? You start to feel a lot better about those games in November when you play some of those powers in college football. Miami, you're saying, hey, that was our first game. That's probably as bad as it's going to be offensively for us if we're just talking about, like, growing throughout the course of a season. That's our jumping off point. And we won in one of the toughest environments in college football. Like, what are we going to do in the future? What are we capable of doing? How much better is this thing going to get? So the implications from this game, either side of it, like it's a tale of two seasons, I believe, coming from that game. We're going to overreact either way, just so we're on the same page. Take it with a grain of salt. It's week one, but still, there's a lot that can come from that game. Quickly here, because we got J.C. Simonton on the other side of this. Notre Dame and A&M, big storyline game. Riley Leonard, Mike Elko, they were together at Duke. Now they're separated on different sidelines. Notre Dame on paper, they're underdogs, but like on paper they should win this game. You got Mike Elko, his first year at A&M. You got Connor Wegman, who hasn't played a full season yet. Notre Dame went to the portal and got Riley Leonard. They got a lot more talent on the outside. I mean, they're going into year three now. Like, if Notre Dame is going to be who they say they're going to be, it starts by winning a game like this on the road for Marcus Freeman in year three. LSU and USC in Vegas, I said at the top of the show, man, nothing that happens in this game will stay in Vegas. Like, it won't. Similar to what I said about Miami and Florida, the overreaction from either side of this is going to be massive. We're going to judge a book by its cover, but what I want to focus on here is what you can internally tell yourself for either side of this if you win. Because the words that we tell ourselves, man, whether they are true or not, they're powerful. They're powerful. If USC wins this game, you say, we just beat an SEC team. Bring on the Big Ten. Is that true or untrue? I'm not here to talk about what LSU is going to be throughout the course of the season, but if you win this game, the confidence that would build, I think, is pretty massive. And talking about talking about LSU, if they beat USC, whether they stop the Lincoln Riley offense or they outscore the Lincoln Riley offense, what you're saying going forward is, okay, like, hey, we did that to that head coach. we got some chops now. Like, what can we accomplish if this was the jumping off point for us the first week of the college football season? So it's going to be awesome. A little bonus here, Penn State at West Virginia. We're going to get, I think, a relatively reliable gauge that first week of the season, not because of West Virginia's defense being incredible, but the Penn State offense is something we've all had question marks around throughout this entire offseason. Going to Morgantown is not just a place where you take a stroll on in there and walk out with a dub. I'll leave it at that. So week one's going to be phenomenal. Cannot wait, and excited to hear y'all's takes on the games that are about to be just absolutely incredible. All right, so joining us now, we have got a national columnist for us here at On3. Just delivers hot fire on a multiple times a week basis over on3.com. Friend of the program, Jesse Simonton, joining us now. Jesse, what's going on, man? How we living?
I'm living well. Enjoyed that segment. I think, if Clemson upsets Georgia in week one, the amount of crowing that Dabo Swinney is going to do is going to be an all-time. I mean, we thought he fired back at, Tyler from Spartanburg a year ago. I don't even know what he has in the holster if they pull off that upset. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think the other stuff you kind of laid out is probably more plausible, but it certainly would shake up the landscape of the 2024 season from the jump.
Dude, the amount of crow that I will have to eat on that Sunday morning after, because I've been saying, since we turned the page on the new college football season, like I keep saying, Georgia is going to cover the spread. They're going to do it with ease. Like it's going to be like the starting block for them when it comes to the national title run. So if that happens, like we're in the same boat there. Dabo will be providing a fair amount of crow. I will be eating said crow. But man, let's talk about your college football playoff field, because you released this, I believe it was in the last week, and you and I align on a lot of things. We differ on a couple, but I want to talk about your conference champs here. You got Georgia winning the SEC. You got Ohio State out of the Big Ten, Florida State out of the ACC, and Utah out of the Big 12. So walk me through this top four really quick. What went into those champs for me?
Yeah, so the way I kind of did this exercise, JD, was I used the parameters of my preseason top 25 to then make kind of these postseason predictions. And so I had Utah as my highest ranked Big 12 team. I think the Utes, when you have Cam Rising coming back, Brent Kuthi, the tight ends back, you bring back the running back. I mean, they were just completely decimated by injuries a year ago. I think Kyle Whittingham is a top 10, borderline top 5 coach in the sport. So he's transitioned this program in and out of conferences, I think two or three other times. I don't see them missing a beat in 24 if they can stay healthy. So I have them as my Big 12 champs. I think Florida State, for all that they lost, I still really like what they have defensively. I think Patrick Payton and Marvin Jones Jr. are just going to be beasts off the edge. And while I am skeptical about kind of the ceiling that DJU provides at quarterback, they may just run the hell out of the ball. It may not matter all that much against Florida State's schedule. So I think with Roydell Williams and the guys they have there, they kind of did the Alabama East thing where they went to Tuscaloosa and brought, 5 or 6 guys from the Tide after Nick Saban retired. So I still have them kind of a cut above Clemson and Miami for the ACC. And then I think Georgia and Ohio State kind of, are self-explanatory. These are two of the most talented, deepest teams in the country. Kirby Smart, his comments yesterday, I think were on point in terms of, that football maybe isn't quite being played as well, as cleanly as it has been in the past, because there has been this kind of suck of depth from all these programs. And yet I would say the pushback on that is that Georgia still benefits more than anybody because they are able to stack up some of these 4 and 5 stars that other programs don't have. So, this is going to be a season, JD, and we've talked about it a bunch. You might have to win 15, 16, 17 games. So even if you lose a couple, and we're going to have to train our minds, it's not going to be a perfect season. There's not going to be a ton of 12-0s and 11-1s that are making the playoffs. It's going to be a lot of 10-2s. And so if you lose a couple games,
Kirby
Georgia,
Smart.
that's okay.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, that's okay, because then you get into the playoff and you still have the deepest roster. So that's how I kind of landed on those 4 conference champs. Yeah,
Georgia is fascinating because Kirby Smart is saying, hey, I have I have less quality depth than I've ever had. And it's like, well, if the rich people are eating off paper plates, like what's going on with the middle class? Like what's going on with the rest of college football? So I don't think Georgia's hurting by any stretch. You and I are in lockstep there. One thing that I thought was maybe worth unpacking is Ohio State as your Big Ten champ. Ohio State, I believe right now, is favored to win the Big Ten. I'm all in on Ohio State. The thing that I'm having trouble squaring is what to make of Will Howard. What do you make of Will Howard as it pertains to Ohio State and their outlook in 2024?
Yeah, you're all in on the Ducks. You're quacking. You got the quack going, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's less about Will Howard than maybe everything that's around Will Howard. Now, I do think that he does the one thing that Kyle McCord could not a year ago, and that's offer something with his legs in the red zone. Ohio State really struggled to score touchdowns, to punch it in, kicking way too many field goals last season. I don't think that's going to be as big of an issue when you have the element of Howard's legs plus the addition of a Quinshon Judkins and a healthy Trevion Henderson. So he's not afraid to throw the ball deep. That was something that Kyle McCord also kind of struggled on. So while I don't think it's a serious upgrade, that maybe some in Columbus believe, the fact that he's lost a little weight, the fact that Ryan Day has been effusive in his praise, I'm at least concerned about that position compared to where I was a year ago, and just everything else on the roster. I mean, when you account for what they did NIL-wise, bringing back all these seniors who are trying to become, from day 2, day 3 picks to day 1 picks, and then, let's get a cherry on top and add a Caleb Downs. It's tough not to like what Ohio State's done, at least, roster-wise.
They really got Caleb Downs just because they felt like it, which is just a ridiculous thing to add to that defense. The thing that terrifies me, Jesse, is how good that run game is going to be, which you mentioned with Will Howard and his legs, and I think they have the best backfield in America, but the way that Chip Kelly is going to utilize it with how diverse it sounds like they're going to be in the run game, I think that's just going to be a problem for the rest of college football. No Wisconsin on here, but I do want to jump around a little bit. Michigan at number 9. So I saw you put this out, and I was like, gosh, dang it. Like, shoot, I think he's right. Because everyone's saying, they'll be 9-3, yours truly included. And it would be just like Sherrone Moore, just like Michigan, to go 10-2, kind of backdoor their way into the college football playoff. What do you think about Michigan, and why do you have them in this group of 12?
Yeah, I'm clearly on the opposite side of, I think, almost everybody else in the national media on the Wolverines. I'm not selling them just because they lost 13 guys to the draft, and Jim Harbaugh, that, their best coach of all time, is no longer in Ann Arbor. I'm still banking on kind of a continued continuity of just what this program discovered. Now, you can insert your own Connor Stallions joke there if you want, but I think it's illuminating to say, hey, I ranked the 10 most impactful players in the Big Ten. I've been going through these. It's obviously a subjective list. I don't have like a formula that's like A plus B plus C equals D to spit it out. I take into various accounts. But I think it's certainly notable for everyone saying, Michigan, doesn't have this talent or has lost so much. They had 4 of my top 10 players, JD. They have 3 first-round draft picks on defense. They probably had the best tight end in Colston Loveland on offense. So while we have no idea what we're going to get from Alex Orji, if he's even going to win the job, but if they use him kind of like Jalen Milroe, but maybe even run him a little bit more than Alabama did a year ago, you lean on Donovan Edwards. I love that for as much as they did lose, defensively, I think Josiah Stewart, the Coastal Carolina kid, is going to be even better in year 2. They bring in the big linebacker from Maryland they like a lot. So I think on most weeks, they're just going to physically outman teams. So they may go 10-2, and they may get, it may be ugly against Ohio State because they just don't have the horses. And maybe they lose it to a USC or a Texas, obviously. But I think 10-2 is certainly plausible. And if this Michigan team goes 10-2, especially after being the reigning champs, they're getting in the Big Ten championship. Or they're getting into the playoffs, excuse me.
Yeah, going back to what you just said about being on the opposite end of the spectrum of maybe some of the national media, usually a pretty good place to be. Like usually, kind of being out there by yourself, usually some other people will come and join you as we see Michigan reel off a couple of big wins.
We'll see.
The quarterback is fascinating because the more I think about it, what you just said I think is on the money. Like I don't know how much it really matters. Like Jack Tuttle, Alex Orji, Davis, like they won the Big Ten, and granted it was a different Big Ten back then, but like they won the Big Ten with Cade McNamara playing quarterback. Like not to knock Cade McNamara, but if anybody, on this roster can do what he did in managing the game, and then maybe Alex Orji brings that Milroe-esque element you talked about, like it's going to be very intriguing. But I'm with you there. I think that's the one team where I'm like, man, if I could redo this, and I'm not backtracking here, but if I had to pick a team that I could add into like my field of 13, I think Michigan would be that team. You mentioned Texas. They're at the 5 spot. We agree they're going to be in the college football playoff. I guess my question is, how confident are you that the SEC runner-up will be in that 5 spot?
That's a great question. I think that if the records are fairly close, especially with a Texas, because they are going to Michigan. So not only are they playing this SEC schedule, and while their schedule isn't, akin to an Oklahoma's, which certainly got the short end of the stick in terms of the newcomers of the league, they still, they're playing Georgia. They got A&M. They have some other tough games on the slate. Oh, and you have to go, week 2 to Ann Arbor. So I think if it's a competitive game, whoever loses that SEC championship game, in all likelihood, is going to be that 5, maybe the 6 seed. Again, the way I did this was not exactly from that lens. I kind of did it using my preseason top 25, but the point still stands.
Now, Jesse, I think you're one of the smartest people in this space. And so when you and I matched up on how many SEC teams we had in our playoff, I was like, hey, there we go, JD. There we go. 5 SEC teams. My thought was like, I just think they're going to have the best reference points when it comes down to like, call it a 10-2 Penn State versus a 10-2 Missouri or a 10-2 Tennessee. What was your thought process in having 5 there from the old Southeastern Conference?
Yeah, I kind of almost did like a light flicker myself when I realized I had 5, and I was like, man, is that one too many? Because even when you and I were in Dallas together, we talked about this, like, is it 4? Is it 3? Is it, some people think it's 6. I think 6 is far too many. But when you think about the fact that there's 9 SEC teams in the preseason top 25, while the AP poll doesn't have any direct correlation to the actual rankings, we know that it sets a narrative. It does absolutely become kind of a template that the selection committee kind of uses as it then, goes through the rest of its parameters. And it's not hard to see with Ole Miss's schedule, with Missouri's schedule, that, if they win the right games and enough games, they're going to get in. And then Georgia, Texas, Alabama, it's hard to say that those 3 programs aren't going to get in. So I think a great example of this exercise and how it's illuminating when there was some pushback that, oh, you had 5 SEC teams. I had Tennessee ranked 12th in my rankings. They don't make it. Even though it's quote unquote a 12-team playoff, you have to kind of readjust, recalibrate your brain. It's not the top 12 teams. And so if it was the top 12 teams like Nick Saban wants, Tennessee or the SEC would have gotten 6 programs in. But it's not. So in the end, Penn State and Tennessee, for my teams, Big Ten, SEC, they ended up getting left out. And there was some pushback on that, but that's absolutely how it could play out this fall.
Yeah, speaking of getting left out, there were 2 teams that jumped out to me where I was looking for them, and I was like, are they on there? Am I missing them? And that's Miami and Notre Dame. Notre Dame makes me nervous. I don't know what to think of Riley Leonard. I think the schedule probably gets them in from where I'm sitting. Miami, though, with Cam Ward, you're maybe not as keen on the Canes as we sit here right now. What was the thought process with those 2 teams being on the outside looking in?
Yeah, I actually think Miami is frankly a little bit underrated in the preseason polls, but I think it's more of kind of a coin flip between them, Florida State, and Clemson in terms of who wins the league this year. And so I rode with the Noles just frankly because I think right now Mike Norvell's track record exceeds that of Mario Cristobal. Cristobal is a damn fine coach when it comes to January to September, building a roster and accumulating talent. It's those sticky Saturdays, from September to November that seems to give him a lot of problems. And so if we're talking about the margins there, I'm going to roll with the Noles, but I could absolutely see Cam Ward having a phenomenal season. Miami, I don't think has had a 3,000 yard passer, which isn't even all that much. Since 2017. That's also the last time they won 10 games. So this certainly is setting up to be kind of an all-in season, not too dissimilar from Penn State, Ole Miss, Missouri, where this roster is going to look wholly different a year from now. So can they cash in? Can they capitalize? I'm with you on the Notre Dame skepticism. I do have them in the playoff because I think the schedule is extremely fortuitous. But that puts a lot of pressure on week one. I think if you lose at A&M, even though you're going to be either a slight dog or maybe coin flip favorite there, if you lose that game, there's not a lot of other really good teams on your schedule. I think you only have 3 road games all season. You pretty much have to beat Florida State and USC, I think, to get in.
I'm over here putting words in your mouth, Jesse. Yep, Jesse Simonton, he didn't pick the Irish. Notre Dame fans, go get after him. No, okay, so I missed that. You have them at 10. I totally looked past that. They're at the 10 spot. They would be going to Tuscaloosa that first round. Yeah, they're one of those teams that, I like them. I like the schedule. I think you and I are in lockstep here. If there was a team, I already told you, I think if I had to add a 13th team in, it'd be Michigan. Who's that team that you're like, man, I almost put them in. They were right there, but I just couldn't bring myself to pull the trigger?
Yeah, for me, it was either probably Tennessee or Clemson. Because while it is easy to poo-poo on Dabo's complete dereliction of duties in terms of using the transfer portal at all, I do think Clemson likes its 22. So if they can somehow survive these depth concerns that all these teams have, I could absolutely see the Tigers winning the ACC. I think it's easy to be a Cade Klubnik skeptic because we just haven't seen it. He is a 5-star that just hasn't quite lived up to the billing. But if Dabo kind of takes the handcuffs off, Garrett Riley, because that was not a Garrett Riley offense a year ago. That was still the Clemson putt-putt offense. And so if we can maybe take the driver out a little bit and start to get this thing going, then maybe Clemson, makes a leap offensively, because we know what they are defensively. They're going to be a top flight unit. And so I don't have a lot of concerns there. So I had Clemson just on the outside looking in, and I had Tennessee. I just think that, Nico is such an X factor. And then you talk about defense. I mean, Tim Banks, what he's done on a yearly basis, he's continued to progress for the Vols. I think this is the year everything kind of culminates. They've improved in significant areas each season, red zone, third down. Now it's, can they shore up the secondary? If they do that, they absolutely can be kind of a sleeper contender. So Penn State fans will get mad because I left them out, but I'm still extremely skeptical about that offense. I got to see that to believe it.
Yeah, got to see it to believe it. I like Drew Aller. I even like Coltonecki. I just don't know who he's throwing the football to. I have no idea who's going to be catching passes in Happy Valley with that whole deal going down. Even if they go 10-2, like what we just said about the SEC, I take a 10-2 Tennessee or a 10-2 Missouri over Penn State with a loss to Ohio State and I don't know, Wisconsin. I don't think they're getting in over that kind of outfit. Going back to what you said, Clemson with a putt-putt offense, I need to reload that, because that is I think the exact right way to put it. Because we saw Garrett Riley pretty much work magic at TCU, and then he gets to Clemson and we're like, whoa, wait, what's going on here? We can't push the ball downfield. We're averaging 6 yards a pass. What gives here?
I completely whiffed on that a year ago. I did think that Dabo, by going outside of the Clemson family tree offensively, I thought that I thought he had shown real growth there, and that he had admitted kind of, hey, yeah, I mean, Brandon Streeter's a good football coach, but it was just it had grown stale there with Tony Elliott and Streeter and Jeff Scott. It was just too many of the same voices, and so to go make the splashy hire, it didn't work. And that surprised me, because I think very highly of Garrett Riley. So we'll see. To draw a line there, that's why I'm skeptical about Coltonecki at Penn State this year. It's not that I have any doubts about him individually. What he did at Kansas was remarkable. But I think when the comments come out that James Franklin is still saying that this is going to be Penn State's offense, and there's been far too many times in previous recent history where his own fingerprints, I think, have kind of gotten in the way there. That leads me to have some skepticism that they're going to suddenly make a massive leap.
It was kind of felt like when you hear Clemson went to the portal, you're like, oh, they went to the portal? Yep, got a portal quarterback. Oh, who'd they grab? Hunter Johnson. Well, wasn't he at – yeah, they went and brought him from Northwestern. He's actually back at Clemson now. It's like, well, you didn't really go outside of your way of doing things. You kind of just found a loophole to say you did, you know? Not that they're trying to be deceptive by any stretch, but like we're looking for growth here. So let's talk about your Final Four here, and then I want to give you the chance to tell the people who your national champion is. You got Georgia and Texas, Ohio State and Oregon as your Final Four in this college football playoff. Walk me through those matchups, and then tell the folks you have winning the whole darn thing.
Yeah, I think you and I are both on the same page that we expect multiple rematches this year. And that's from some of the top teams, because I think that, again, longest season in college football history, ultimately who has the best rosters and the best talent is going to win out. And so you could get a surprise team that maybe crashes the playoff that we didn't even mention here today, whether it's an Oklahoma State or a Texas A&M comes out of nowhere. Those two teams aren't winning the national championship. You know, there's the playoff field may have expanded, but I think the teams that can win the whole thing has actually shrunk. And so while it may be a chalky Final Four, that's kind of the way I see it playing out. I think there are going to be a couple awesome helmet matches that we'll have seen earlier in the season, and we're going to see them again. And ultimately, I think Georgia is going to win the national championship, beating the Buckeyes like they did 2 years ago.
Yeah, we're in lockstep about Georgia winning the national title. And for the folks that are pushing back on like your group being like chalky, it's like this is what the 12-team playoff is. Like you think TCU's making the national title a couple of years ago if we have a 12-team playoff? Like absolutely not. Like they're not getting through that gauntlet of, you know, playing multiple SEC teams or Big Ten teams. So I think it's a great playoff, and I appreciate you breaking it down for us, man. Hey, what are you doing on Saturday mornings? Like, what's your rhythm routine to get into college football Saturday? Because I know like week 0's here, like time to get a rep before week 1. What Jesse Simonton doing before he sits down to watch all the games?
On a normal Saturday, I try to get in a good long workout and just kind of, you know, ease myself into the morning. I'll have game day on. I honestly kind of miss a lot of game day, and then I'll kind of fast forward right before the game starts. So right around that, you know, I try to get up early, have a good workout, get it going, and then it's an all day affair, man. You know how it goes.
There we go. Right into the belly of the beast. You hitting like buys and tries, or we doing some cardio, or like what's the go-to Saturday morning? Just mix it up, or like what's the rhythm there?
Oh yeah, it may. Sometimes it's a double, man. Sometimes you go get a lift and a run. You know, sometimes you're doing a little swim. You know, you just gotta stay active, man. I'm getting old, so I just gotta stay active.
I don't know about that. That definitely puts my Chick-fil-A breakfast routine to shame when it comes to the health side of things. Jesse Simonton, best in the business, man. We appreciate you making time, brother. We'll do this again real soon.
Thanks, JD.
Again, Jesse Simonton. Make sure you keep up with all his work over at on3.com. Again, JD1, $1 for your first month. Gets you access to all the fan sites. I mean, everything that would be behind the paywall, $1 using JD1 for your first month. I'm telling you, that is the best $1 you will spend. Promise you that. So Jesse broke down the playoff field for us. We talked a little week 1, talked about getting ready for week 1. Let's look at what I believe is the biggest game from an impact standpoint, maybe from a matchup standpoint, in all of week 1 for the 2024 college football season. We got Florida. We got Miami. We'll do a full game breakdown the week of the game. So Tuesday predictions, they're back starting week 0, and then week 1, obviously, we'll break down this game. But what are the most important things when it comes to Miami's trip to the Swamp? We'll talk about it right now. Before we get to that, though, make sure you're subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel. Florida Gator fans, Miami Hurricane fans, college football season is here. If you're just now finding this show, you found your home. Because it's college football the way that you want college football discussed and talked about, all right? This show is built on passion, college football passion. So make sure you're subscribed right here so you don't miss a minute of the coverage we have for you around your Canes and your Gators. So the most important things when it comes to this game for either side, I'm going to go team by team here and kind of go back and forth with my list I have. Like, I think for Miami, if I had one thing that I think they need to do in this game, start fast. Like, that sounds simple, But what do we talk about so much with this game? How many times have you heard me say, it's in the swamp. It's in Gainesville. Hey, that kind of throws a grenade of who knows what's going to happen in this game. You want to find a way to minimize that? Get a big play on special teams to start the game. Do what Utah did last year, granted at Utah, where they went deep the first play or the second play of the game for a touchdown. Do something like that. Take the wind out of the sails. Because if you can play this game in a little bit more of a minimized atmosphere, at that point, neutral site at the very least, maybe. In some ways, maybe it's still a little bit Florida, but if you can do that, then you give your offense and just your team as a whole a chance to be a little bit more clear-minded, calms everybody down. Heck, if you can play with a lead, maybe you're able to play a little bit more of a conservative style of game. That is the end-all, be-all. So as much as you need to start fast, as much as that's a plan, you still have to dial it up. If I'm Shannon Dawson, we got something in the chamber for you, whether it's a trick play, whether it's a little play action to start the game, but whatever it is, starting fast is the end-all, be-all for Miami if they want to win this football game. Because if you start slow and you give Florida some extra life, it's going to be tough. It's going to be very, very tough because the swamp is kind of like quicksand. The more that you try and get out of it and the more that you fail to get out of it, then you start to sink. When you start to sink, the swamp starts to frenzy. Their plan won't back down in the fourth quarter. The place is rocking. You don't want to have that for Cam Ward's first start as a Miami Hurricane quarterback. You see, I'm knocking the mic around here if you're watching live on YouTube. That's how fired up we are for week one. Now, for Florida, this is equally as important, kind of in that same vein, answering scores. Now, if you're a Florida Gator fan, you would love to tell yourself, there is no way in heck that Cam Ward walks out there and has any kind of success against us. If Austin Armstrong is able to dial it up defensively to where they can shut him out, great. However, I think conventional wisdom would tell us that Miami's probably going to score points based on all the personnel they have offensively. That is going to be in their DNA. I wholeheartedly believe that. And so if they score, it's not the end of the world, but if you can answer scores, going back to keeping the crowd in it, that's going to be huge. Also, you don't want to give a potent offense like Miami a chance to play with a 10-point lead. Heck, even a 7-point lead, you don't really want to be in a situation where they have the football back going in to score and they're up by a touchdown. That's not good business. So if you can answer scores, keep the crowd as engaged as possible, that is the wild card for Florida, keeping the crowd in it. I told y'all, if it was at a neutral site, I'd pick Miami and I'd feel pretty good about it. Also, if it was in a neutral site, I think that spread would be a lot more than Miami minus 2.5. That's not knocking Florida. I've told you I think their roster is a lot better than most folks would give credit for, but the key here for Florida is the fact that it's in the swamp. Make sure you can maximize it being in the swamp. Now, this sounds cliche for the most important thing for Miami going forward here in this game, but run the freaking ball. Don't overthink this. Don't make a simple game complicated. We said it on yesterday's show. Football is a simple game made complex by stupid people. They don't have stupid people in charge at Miami. Give the ball to Damian Martinez. We talk so much around all of the things that Shannon Dawson does offensively. He wants to push the ball deep. He has an air raid background. Him and Hal Mummy and Mike Leach, they're all kind of in that same coaching tree. And they got Cam Ward. And we talk about him coming from the air raid system at Washington State and him pushing the ball downfield, averaging 7.7 yards an attempt. I'm talking really fast here because I think it's so important. Miami needs to pound the rock. When you're on the road, you keep it simple. When you're on the road, you go north and south. Going back to what I just said, they want to push the ball deep. They want to throw the football. Don't let that confuse you as to who Mario Cristobal really is. He's an offensive lineman. He's an offensive lineman. That's not a head coach. Offensive linemen, they want to be physical at the point of attack. They want to move the line of scrimmage. They want to dominate you against your will. If Miami can do that effectively, it'll be massive on a number of levels. One, it'll quiet the crowd down. Two, it'll slow the game down. Three, it'll help Cam Ward just feel more comfortable in the most difficult environment, I believe, or one of the most difficult environments, I believe, in college football. It'll just settle everything in. Also, little cherry on top, you run the football effectively in that first half with Damian Martinez and their stable of backs, those safeties start to creep up. That defense starts to cheat. Boom, over the top to Sam Brown. Boom, over the top to JoJo Trader. Things open up downfield once that happens for you. So run the freaking ball. Don't make it confusing. Do what you do offensively if you're Mario Cristobal and company. Now for Florida, offensively, get the ball to Trey Wilson. He may very well be one of the best. I almost said he may very well be the best player on the field. I think when Florida has the football, he is the best player on the field. Okay, you could make an argument for Cam Ward being the best player in this football game, but Trey Wilson is the best playmaker in this game. And we saw versions of what he was last season as a true freshman. Like early on in that Tennessee game, I believe it was, like they were force-feeding him the football every which way. It was jet sweeps. It was pop passes. It was quick game. Get him the football. In the biggest games, you want your best player to have the largest impact possible. Trey Wilson can't have the largest impact possible if we get to the third quarter and he's got 2 catches. That's not winning football. Okay, so feed number 3. Get him in rhythm. You want to make sure your best players are able to be in the flow of the game by the first quarter. You hear Julian Edelman talk about that on different podcasts, how Belichick and Brady would do a great job getting him in the game flow early. Like, do the same thing with Trey Wilson. Allow him to impact this game from the get-go. If that happens, what we talked about with with Miami running the football, same thing happens if you get Trey Wilson the football, in the sense that your quarterback calms down, belief starts to grow, defense starts to key on number 3. When that happens, hey, then we have some counters off of that. Then we have other guys that get open, like Elijah Badger. Other guys get to eat when that starts happening. So you feed Trey Wilson. He is your go-to guy. He is your bell cow. If you win this football game, it is behind a massive stat line from Trey Wilson, right? So make that happen. Now, for Miami, do not turn the ball over. And y'all, like, this isn't novel analysis. Every single coach from Pee-wee to flag football to professional football, if you don't turn the football over, you'll have a chance to win the ball game. That's the obvious part of this. But I keep going back to the Swamp's impact because it's exactly that. I think it's one of the most impactful factors of this whole game. And Miami being able to control that, in a perfect world, minimize that, is their path to victory. But if you turn the football over, you might as well back up a truckload of Red Bull and pass it out to everybody within the Swamp, like from the stadium perspective, and then also pass it out to the sideline over there at Florida, because that will give them just so much energy, so much juice, so much belief. And this season, too, this game in itself, I believe, is a microcosm of everything that they have heard this past offseason going into this next season. They're not this, they're not that, they're doubted, they're this, they're that. Their dogs at home is Florida. If they're able to get a couple turnovers, even one turnover early, like that is going to just light this whole place on fire. And Florida will be swinging very big in that sense. So Miami, do not turn the ball over. Take care of it. Cam Ward, I know you want to push the ball downfield, and I'm here for it. I think they'll do that successfully throughout the course of this season. But, like, throwing it away, that might be one of the best plays that you can make any given time throughout this game. Now, for Florida, here's what I would say. Last big talking point here for the most important things in this game. If you want to lose this game, if you want to go out there and just throw this game away, make your secondary cover Miami's receivers for like 5-ish seconds, 5+ seconds. Like, give them just a bunch of Mississippis. The way that would happen is Cam Ward back there playing Pirates of the Caribbean. He's Jack Sparrow making you miss in the backfield, because I think that Florida defensively, structurally, from a game plan perspective, will be improved from last year to this year. One, like Austin Armstrong's growth. 2, the overall personnel getting more experience on the back end. 3, you got Ron Roberts in there helping oversee the defense. But like the big thing here is, if you have a good game plan dialed up, but you don't get home on Cam Ward and he breaks contain and you're back there trying to chase him around, like that's how big plays happen. And Cam Ward, we talk a lot about his athleticism and the way he can hurt you with his legs. Like, yeah, he got in the end zone a few times last year for Washington State. But like, I think where he's extra dangerous is how he breaks contain, keeps his eyes downfield, and then throws the football pretty accurately, pretty well on the run. If you want to lose this game, let Miami do their Pirates of the Caribbean deal. Let guys run rampant all over the place and make yourself have to cover them in a scramble drill for multiple seconds at a time. If you want to try and negate that, minimize the Cam Ward ad-libs is kind of the main point we're trying to make here. So I can't wait. Again, this game is 17 days away right now at the time of us being live. This is awesome. Again, we'll give you our winner on our Tuesday prediction show. So if you want to know who our winner is in this game, subscribe to this channel. That short form video will be out on this channel, but I mean, more importantly, make sure you're dialed into the live show. So let me know what you believe the most important thing is for this Florida-Miami game. But again, for me, I think those are the key ones when you look at keys to success for those teams. Hey, thanks for everybody tuned in live right now, man. We got a good crowd. Week 1 right around the corner. If you are watching live, little thumbs up button under the picture. Go ahead and just hit the like button for us. We appreciate that in advance for getting that done. Just a good way for us to gauge the content you want to see. And, yeah, we appreciate y'all making that happen. All right, so Kirby Smart yesterday talked to the media about just where Georgia is right now during fall camp and kind of their outlook on the season. And he opened his press conference talking about the depth overall for Georgia and where they're at. So take a listen to this.
We got a long way to go as a football team. We are nowhere near where we close to where we need to be. I feel like we have less depth than we've ever had, and that's kind of a common theme talking to other coaches I talk to. I call it the deterioration of football because every year we've been here, I feel like we've had more players capable of going in and play winning football, and every year that goes down. So we've got to keep working to increase that number.
The deterioration of football. Anytime you hear a word like deterioration, like, whoa, what's going on here, Coach? What are we talking about? Kirby Smart talking about the deterioration of football. He's not just talking about the transfer portal. Like, he also said this, if you go watch the full press conference, he says, yeah, the portal could be part of it, but I think also some of this now is like the way that the high school game is being developed. Like the practice schedule that these coaches now have access to, the practice time these coaches now have access to, is lesser than maybe it used to be. So you have less time to develop kids. Also, just quite frankly, you have less kids playing football, which is a whole other topic in itself. The portal's obviously part of this. But I think it's easy to hear Kirby Smart say things like this, and you're like, oh, man, like he's just saying that. He's just saying that because, he's trying to downplay how good Georgia's going to be. Like, Kirby Smart, I'm telling you, he has no reason to lie. Like, he has no reason to say these things about his team's depth as we sit here in August. Like, that's not his game. And so I think if you're a Georgia fan, you hear that and you're like, uh-oh, like, is that bad? Like, should we be worried as Georgia fans about Kirby saying he has less quality depth than he's ever had since he's been there? What I would say is, while it's not ideal to have your head coach saying that, and I don't think he's saying that just to say that, what we said with Jesse Simonton earlier on the show is 100% true. If Kirby Smart is saying this at Georgia, if the rich people are saying, hey, now we're eating off of paper plates as opposed to the china we used to eat off of, what does that mean for the middle class? That means they're probably either one, going starving, or two, they're eating off of napkins. So Kirby Smart also acknowledged this during his press conference. He's like, yeah, but we still probably have more depth than everybody else. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. Look at what Georgia's done through the portal over the course of the last couple of seasons. Like in 2022, they took 0 transfers. In 2023, they took 4. In this past cycle, they took 9 transfers. 9. Now, some of that you say, okay, well, it's different with different guys leaving to the NFL and things like that. Like, you go to the portal because you believe you can get better or you have a need at certain positions. Like, Georgia also this past cycle, I believe, lost 25 guys to the portal. Not saying Georgia's got this massive issue where guys are jumping ship, but like it's the nature of where we are right now in college football. Guys have options they want to play, so it's hard to keep guys on your roster. And so when we talk about the deterioration of football, again, I'm not really scared for Georgia. I'm scared for other schools. Because if we're at a place right now where you have so many options as a player, and if you're not playing, you're unhappy, you don't like your NIL, whatever, you can jump ship, everyone's losing players. Everyone, not just Georgia. Not just Georgia. And so what I would say is, like, people, as much as they jump into the portal away from Georgia, you jump in the portal and Georgia wants you don't think you're giving that a pretty hard look? You look at what they did via the NFL draft and how many cats they have drafted. You don't think maybe Georgia is more of a portal destination if they'll take you? I think Georgia probably turns away a fair amount of guys, as much as maybe they lose guys. Not saying it's equivalent, but I'm saying I bet you there's a pretty fair amount of dudes that Georgia's saying, we're good. We're actually cool with this 5-star we recruited out of high school that's been playing scout team for us over the course of the last season. Like, we're going to give him a chance. Like, Georgia has done a great job of stocking the cupboard. So when they do lose guys, it's never good to lose guys. But at the exact same time, The depth at Georgia, again, superior to other places. And so if that's the case, if there is a smaller pool to draw from, if you will, when it comes to acquiring talent, like Georgia's probably still catching the most fish. Even if there's less fish to begin with, Georgia's probably still catching more. Because look at the proof of concept. What I just said about the portal, I think, is the exact same thing you would say about the high school recruiting. Like, if there is using Kirby's words, like if there's less guys playing the sport and there is a lower level of development, like Georgia's still getting who they want, is my estimation of things. Because of their proof of concept they can pitch to you. If you care about development, if you care about going to the NFL, Georgia's probably on your short list. And I happen to believe a lot of guys with 4 and 5 stars next to their name care about playing at the next level. So this is the other thing I would take away from this. Like, anytime you hear Kirby being nervous or you hear him sounding agitated or impatient, which is fairly often, just to be fair, not to knock Kirby, I think that's a positive thing, because every elite person at their craft, they're impatient. And I don't mean impatient in a toxic way. I mean impatient in terms of what they want to get done. And so Kirby Smart saying, like, we are nowhere near where we need to be. There was another clip that's circling around on the Twitter sphere where they're like, hey, can you address some weaknesses within your football team? He goes, yes. They go, will you name them? He goes, no. Like, Kirby Smart, when he's nervous and he's feeling some kind of way, like, that to me means there is real work being put in behind the scenes. Everyone's putting in work behind the scenes, but Kirby and what they've done at Georgia, their process is pretty proven. Their method of development is pretty proven. The way they practice, the way they've done things, you have to ratchet it up and change it every single year. And with the new college football playoff format, you obviously have to change it. But, like, I think impatient and nervous-ish Kirby, nervous-looking Kirby, the way that he operated in this press conference, I think that's a bad sign for the rest of college football. Like, you read about Nick Saban when he was at Bama and they were reeling off national titles. He would be at, like, booster events or speaking engagements, and he'd be up there on the stage sitting in a chair, and whoever's emceeing it is talking. Like, Nick Saban is visibly, like, tapping his foot. His mind is somewhere else, whether it's recruiting, whether it's game planning. Like, there's never enough hours for him to get to where he wants to go, to get to his team to where they want to go. So all that's to say, deterioration of football, it's a scary word. Everybody's got less depth, ironically, at the time where they need it the most because of the portal. Georgia's just fine. Georgia's just fine. Kirby's just fine. And the way that he's operating, I think, is kind of like that weather you get before a very bad storm. Like, you can kind of tell the winds are changing, the tide's shifting. Maybe you can smell it a little bit. Storm's coming. And it's coming from Athens, Georgia to the rest of college football. So, again, if you've watched the show, if you've been tuned in live, man, like, we have Georgia winning the whole darn thing. I see it in the live chat. Nobody can blame the kids for wanting to play. 100% true. Like, I don't think you fault anybody in this situation. Like, you don't blame the kids for wanting to go have somewhere to play. Also, full transparency, I don't blame the kids for wanting to make more money. Like, if you have a certain value on yourself as a professional, call a spade here. These kids are professionals when they're making that much money. Like, I don't fault the kid. You can go make life-changing money to some degree, or I guess life-changing in the moment kind of money. I don't fault the kid. Who I do fault, the people making the rules. That's a whole other discussion that we'll have at a different time. So we've been giving out our record predictions throughout the course of the last really few weeks leading into the college football season. And it has been divisive. It has ruffled some feathers. It is what it is. Like, we just call our shot and we let the chips fall where they may. So today for you, we got Oregon and Clemson. But let's start with Oregon, man. Vegas has Oregon at over under 10.5 wins during the 2024 regular season. You look at how Oregon's built, and like I keep on coming back to this thought around the Ducks, man. They check every box for me when it comes to what an elite college football team should have on the roster. Experienced quarterback, check, Dylan Gabriel. Played at a high level at Oklahoma. I think this system's going to fit him very well. Better than he did at Oklahoma, quite frankly. Elite skill players. Do you have them? Because you got to have them to win one-on-one battles when you play those really good defenses. You got to have somebody that can make something shake and score points for you. Had Tez Johnson from a season ago, who I expect his role to potentially expand, and he had over 1,000 yards last year. So role expanding is maybe a funny way to put it. Evan Stewart, who everybody wanted via the portal, one of the best receivers in the portal, elite lines of scrimmage. Like a Johnny Cornelius and Josh Connerly are two names that maybe nationally don't get enough credit. Those dudes on the offensive line for Oregon are as good as it gets in the sport. They're going to have a chance to make a whole lot of money here in the NFL when it's all said and done, and they anchor that offensive line. Also, this is where we'll get maybe a little bit of pushback, and that's fine. I believe Dan Lanning's an elite head coach. Not really good, not up and coming, though he has both those things. I think he's elite. You say, well, JD, but he hasn't really done anything, has he? Like you're calling him elite already? I'm calling him elite because to me, being an elite head coach is how you do your job, how you focus on your process. And people will be very quick to point out different situations where he took a gamble on his football team, mind you, and came up short. People fault him for the fourth down stuff against Washington, and I'm like, we wouldn't even be having this discussion if they convert on fourth down. The game's over. So what did Dan Lanning do? Rolled the dice on his football team to go and put the game away, which is kind of getting down a rabbit hole there. Talk about him, being an early in his career as a head coach. That's a totally fair point. But look at what he's done in a short amount of time at Oregon. If you were hiring today for your next college football coach to start your program around, and you couldn't hire Kirby Smart, I think you can make a discussion, then you can have an argument that Dan Lanning is the guy to hire there because of how he recruits, because of how he's built this roster. And you say, well, what was Mario Cristobal's roster before he got there? Fair point, had a good base to work with, but he also went to the portal and got some really key guys to make this roster and to make this team what it has been since he's been there. Like, they don't, if they make no portal moves, they don't have the success they've had. And so that's all like a very tangible thing to point to. But I look at just the way that this team operates. You've heard me say this many times if you watch this show. Persona of your leadership filters down to be the persona of your football team. What is Oregon? Tough, gritty as heck, competitive, get after you. That's who Dan Lanning is. I believe that's how he coaches. I believe that's how he operates. I believe that's how he lives life. That is elite from where I'm sitting. I've said it many times. I believe that Dan Lanning will win a national title at Oregon in the not-too-distant future. So let's go game by game here, as we often do on this show. You got Idaho to start the year, club dub. You play Boise State. Boise State now, Oregon's going to win this football game, but Boise State may very well be that G5 team that makes the dance. So don't scoff at Boise State there. At Oregon State, a little run it back with the Pac-12 rivalry, with them no longer being in the same conference with Oregon and Oregon State. Oregon will win that handily. They go to UCLA. This time a Big Ten matchup. That's just weird, dude. Oregon and UCLA playing in the Big Ten. A Rose Bowl game as a Big Ten conference game. Very weird, but that'll be a dub for Oregon as well. Michigan State will also be a win. Now, then you have Ohio State in Autzen. And this is a game that, this legitimately could be number 1 versus number 2 in all of college football at that point in the year, depending on what happens in different sectors of the SEC leading into this game. I go back and forth on this game quite a bit. We'll give you our prediction the week of, obviously, for that game as well, and things can change. But like right now, I think that when you look up and down the rosters for both sides, I think you can maybe give the edge defensively to Ohio State. But again, I think Oregon's probably right there. I think you probably give the edge on the perimeter right now. I would give that to Oregon defensively with, not defensively, offensively with an Evan Stewart and a Tez Johnson. Jeremiah Smith will be incredible. Like if you're arguing about that position group, like it is what it is. Like I don't have a big issue there. My point being, I think that you go group by group here, and you probably give the edge to Ohio State some spots, you give the edge to Oregon some spots, but at the most important position here, I give the edge to Oregon at quarterback. I'm not down on Will Howard. I just think Dylan Gabriel is going to be the difference maker in this game. Also, with it being an Autzen, that probably helps things. So you'll see Ohio State again if you're Oregon, probably in the Big Ten title game. But I think Oregon wins that game and they stay undefeated. Then you get a win at Purdue. You get a win against Illinois. And then you go to Michigan. Now, this is one that, honestly, Ohio State, from a roster level, will be your toughest test. Based on when you have them in the year, you're a little bit beat up. Depth is a big factor for everybody throughout college football. But, playing at Michigan at this point in the season, that could be your toughest test of your entire regular season. The thing that I like about Oregon's schedule is the fact that it ramps up, though. Like, as much as you talk about the fact that you have to go to Michigan and it's late in the year, like, that's all true. But at this point in the year, the only, not question, but the only thing that I'm watching closely for Oregon is how Dillon Gabriel gets up to speed in this offense, because this offense is built off of making good decisions, making quick decisions. You can't make a good, quick decision if you're not 110% on the same page with your OC, with your receivers, with your line, all those things. And that takes time for a guy that just transferred in during the spring. But by November, you should be running and gunning. Everything should be clicking. It'll be a really good test in the trenches for Oregon. However, I think they win that game in Ann Arbor. You beat Maryland, you go to Wisconsin. This game could be a little bit trappy now. You got jump around blaring. You're in Madison. Luke Fickell, all he does is win big football games from where I'm standing with what he did with Cincinnati. Like, I like Wisconsin a lot this year. However, Oregon wins that game. Rivalry game to finish the year against the Huskies. I think Oregon's going undefeated. I do. I mean, say what you want. Their roster, their head coach, their quarterback, to me, again, they have all the makings of how an elite college football team should operate. And I think they will. Now, there's also, when we talk about Oregon, just going back to how I look at them as a team heading into this year, there's a lot to trust. There's a lot to trust. Like, we talk about how good can Dillon Gabriel be. I think he'll be really good. But let's say that he just, has a tough situation and he can't put it together and he's just playing poorly. One, that would surprise me. Like, that seems like one of the most unlikely scenarios for Oregon. Two, if the sky falls in and for whatever reason Dillon Gabriel isn't your guy, whether it be injury or whatever, like Dante Moore was one of the highest rated quarterbacks in his respective cycle. Like, he's also a guy that's going to be able to run the offense for you. He was a top 5 portal quarterback when he jumped in there, along with Dillon Gabriel, and Oregon got both. Like, defensively, I don't see a situation where the defense falls off the face of the earth. Very, very high floor outfit for me when we talk about Oregon. Very disaster-proof, if you will, are the Ducks. So I got the over on the 10.5 wins. Clearly, we got them undefeated. I think Oregon runs the table, and they make their way to Indianapolis as a 12-0 program. Curious to hear y'all thoughts on the Ducks, though, because that's going to be one that I think a lot of people are high on Ohio State for a good reason. We're high on Ohio State here as well, but picking that game right now in August, we will go ahead and lean towards the Ducks. All right. So now we got Clemson for you. Now, Clemson, I believe their over-under win total, I think I saw it somewhere at 9.5. It's now at 8.5. The portal for them is always going to be a talking point when we talk about Clemson and what they're going to accomplish. Like, let's just put the pause button on the portal for right now and talking about that, as much as maybe it's relevant or irrelevant. Like, it doesn't really matter when you talk about the college football games being played. Kind of a tired talking point here with Clemson. Outside of the portal, like, the defense, going to be really good. Like, Peter Woods is an absolute force inside for them. He gets another year under his belt out there in that defense. Barrett Carter is a Super Saiyan running around out there playing linebacker for them at Clemson. He's all over the field. Like, you want to watch a fun highlight tape, turn on number 0. The offense is really the question mark. As Jesse Simonton said, can Clemson run the Garrett Riley offense? Can we get the driver out a little bit and stop doing the putt-putt offense? Because I think Garrett Riley, what we've seen him do when he's actually running the show himself, when it's his offense, they will manufacture explosives. And what I mean by that is a lot of eye candy pre-snap, a lot of motions, a lot of different window dressing to get you misaligned to where we may not have a guy that runs 4.3, though Clemson, I believe, does have a guy or two like that now in the program. But even if we don't, like, we can get a 4.5 guy open. Like, we can scheme guys open. That was one of the reasons why TCU was as successful as they were offensively. With that being said, I think they do have more juice at wide receiver than they've had in years past. Tyler Brown, Antonio Williams, both guys that I believe are pretty electric playmakers for them. Antonio Williams wasn't really ever healthy throughout the course of last season, much to the disappointment of everyone out there in Clemson, South Carolina. Tyler Brown played really well in relief of him. You got 2 stud freshmen, though, that I think will have to factor in for you some way, somehow, and that's Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore. Bryant Wesco if you watched the Clemson spring game, had himself a nice day, enough to get you fired up for what he's going to be when he starts playing in the fall. TJ Moore, if you watched his All-American game as a high schooler, pretty much did whatever he wanted. And that wasn't against like some scrub high school from wherever. Like that was an All-American game with other dudes that are going to go play elite college football up there with him. And he dominated. So TJ Moore is a guy I'd be excited about and a name to know if I'm a Clemson fan. So let's go game by game here. The game in Atlanta against Georgia, we've been pretty transparent about. I think Clemson loses that game. I think Georgia's roster is the best in America, and I think they'll be a force this year. That's not saying anything of Clemson. That just, I think, says more about Georgia and where they're at right now. Now, you play App State. What we said about Oregon and them playing Boise State is the same thing I'll say about App State. I think App State's going to contend for a college football playoff spot as a G5 team. We have them actually as our G5 team making the college football playoff. So that's not a walk in the park now. However, I do think you win that football game. You get a bye week before NC State. Now, NC State and Dave Doeren, a bit of a wild card to me. You don't always know what to make of that roster because it doesn't actually seem to matter year in and year out. And it's not to say anything of like, well, it doesn't matter what players Dave Doeren has. It does, but I think the players that Dave Doeren gets and develops and the way they coach it up over there, like, they are a cockroach kind of outfit. And I mean that in an affectionate way, in the sense that, like, they are hard to kill. You can stomp on them. You can think you have the better roster. You can game plan, whatever. Like, they are just a tough out every single time. And so with Grayson McCall now playing quarterback out there for Robert and I think that'll be closer to the version of what they want at quarterback that Brendan Armstrong wasn't last year. As good as the Clemson defense is, I think that the NC State defense will be able to handle Clemson's offense, and I think that the NC State offense will be a little bit improved from a year ago with Grayson McCall. So I actually think you drop that game. You beat Stanford in an ACC game, which is going to be bizarre, but you beat Stanford at Florida State for what I have been calling the DJU Bowl. I think that Florida State will win that football game. I just think that it'll be personal for DJU. I don't think he's a guy to make it personal, but I just think there's going to be a lot of energy going into that week. I think Mike Norvell will scheme it up. And if you're a Clemson fan, you're saying, JD, you're picking us to lose 3 games right now? Like, what is going on? Like, as a Clemson fan, you're like, we've seen what DJU is, brother. Like, we got this. That might be the case right now. I'm going to lean that DJU has improved. I'm going to lean that the Florida State offense will be very physical up front, and that defense can be very good as well. So we'll see what happens there, but I'll pick Florida State to win that game. At Wake Forest, win that game. You beat Virginia. You beat Louisville. Now at Va-Tech, November 9th, that's going to be a good one. That's going to be a very good one because I think Virginia Tech's actually going to be really good this year. I think it's a dogfight. However, I think you get a big win in Blacksburg. You get a win at Pitt. You beat the Citadel, and you beat South Carolina. So you finish with a record of 9-3. And a lot of people are going to be like, man, 9-3? If that ends up being the case, let's just live in that world for a second. Everyone is going to go back to the same talking points. And we may actually go to the same talking points as well. The question will be, well, what if they went to the portal? Could they have beaten a NC State? Could they have beaten a Florida State? Whatever it ends up looking like. I think what's important to note here is, like, Clemson's got Georgia the first game of the year. If Clemson scheduled Yale the first game of the year, they're 10-2. And we're talking about them probably being a college football playoff team, from my estimation, or at least being in that conversation. And I think 9-3 also, and I don't want to, like, give morale points for going 9-3 because at Clemson they expect a lot more than that. But, like, I think it's important to note here, they expect a lot more than that. Why? Because they've been to the mountaintop a couple of times. Because they've made that 4-team playoff. They were consistently making the 4-team playoff. And so to miss the 12-team playoff, like, what the heck is going on? They have earned those expectations. 9-3 is nothing to scoff at, especially when your losses are to what I believe will be 2, potentially 3 ranked teams, depending on what NC State does when they play them. They could finish a lot higher than this. They could be a 10-2, 11-1 team. To me, I am in the need to see it to believe it camp for Cade Klubnik. Not down on Cade Klubnik. I don't even think it's necessarily all his fault. You need to turn the controls over to Garrett Riley, let him cook, get these young wide receivers up and rolling, and empower Cade Klubnik to live up to his billing as a recruit. That's a lot of ifs. That's a lot of ifs. So it's funny, I'm talking about them being 9-3 like we're at somebody's funeral. I promise you, Clemson's going to be a tough out every single week. That's the way I feel about their schedule this year. I think they're a 9-3 football team. But if the offense takes the next step, if they do all those things that I just mentioned, which was a fair amount, which is why we have them what we have them, if they check all those boxes, like, we'll see what Clemson is. But regardless, let me know what you think Clemson's going in 2024 and give me your final win-loss prediction for the Tigers. So we appreciate y'all being tuned in, man. Again, JD1, $1 for your first month on3.com subscription. Recruiting intel, fall camp intel, everything under the sun around the greatest sport on the face of the planet, we've got you covered on on3.com. All right. Also, I want to make sure y'all know the hard count today brought to y'all by our friends over at Rowback. Now, for those of y'all that watch the show, like, you know that I'm a big Rowback guy, have been since we did this show pseudo-independently in Waco, Texas, and they have the best polos, the best hoodies, the best workout shirts on the market. If you need a polo to last you the entire day on a hot game day, like, Rowback is your answer. Moisture-wicking technology, 4-way stretch makes it easy to move in while keeping you feeling fresh. All right, Rowback, they also, in addition to all those things I just mentioned, they've got shorts that are the perfect pairing as well. They're comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and they're just great fabric that's made to stretch. Now, they've also released a ton of new products, bathing suits. I mean, I'm telling y'all, we got a little bit more warm weather. It's starting to get to fall weather, so capitalize on this while you can. Little swimsuit action from Rowback. Rowback also proudly been leading the NIL charge, signing partnerships with college stars like Jalen Milroe and Cade Klubnik, among others. They're becoming the go-to brand for college athletes. So hear me right now. If you hear nothing else, hear this. Use the code JD, just those two letters, on rowback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with code JD. So for those of y'all that have been dialed in for us throughout the darker times. When I say darker times, I mean, like, we all know what I'm talking about. The period in, like, March where a lot of people kind of leave the college football space and they'll go watch something else. They'll watch their Netflix shows. They'll go watch other sports. And more power to them. We love them too, and we're glad that they're back. But for those of y'all that have been putting in the hours with us here through winter conditioning, through spring football, now leading into week 0 and eventually week 1 of the college football season, we're glad to have y'all here. It's our time. It's our time. All right? So let's have an incredible college football season. We are 17 days away from week 1. This time next week is game week. So if you haven't yet subscribed, no time like the present. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. For Nick Bate producing the show, for myself, JD Patel, we're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.